Please welcome Michael Korn, Chief Information Security Officer, University of California, San Diego, and panelists for what you should know about the Internet of Me and your privacy.
Come on, panelists. Well, thanks everybody for coming, and I got to tell you, it's fantastic to see a group of people who are not all privacy professionals interested enough to come to an event like this today. So I really appreciate it. You know, we live in a world where our lives are, is this on, by the way? What? No? Okay. So we live in a world where our lives are incredibly connected by this Internet of Things. For me, it's a very personal thing. I have a continuous glucose monitor on my shoulder. So I am a walking Bluetooth transmitter, which is really interesting when you walk into a secure facility and you look the agents in the eye and say, it can't come off. I just had a new sprinkler put in. It's wireless. I don't know why they put wireless. I'm going to have my Facebook status be my sprinkler status. So I wanted to start, first I want to ask everyone to introduce themselves, and then we'll comment on what it means for privacy in this internet-connected world. So why don't we go ahead and start?
Good morning. Oh, hi, it works now. My name is Masha Sedova, and I'm the co-founder of Elevate Security. I come from a background of being a security awareness practitioner, having done it for a few large organizations in the past, and recently went out on my own to start my own company. And the thing that I'm really obsessed about is security behavior change. How do we as individuals know what is required of us to be secure and also to have our privacy protected? And what does that mean from an enterprise perspective? How do we as employers enable our employees to be secure-minded and to be privacy-minded in what we develop and how it affects the products we produce? So with that, I'll pass it on.
Hi, I'm Margaret Taylor. I'm a Director of Public Affairs at AT&T. Obviously, we are all consumers, so privacy is incredibly important to me. But as an AT&T representative, we are a very large company, as most of you know, and we interact with consumers and businesses in many different ways. And so it's something we take very seriously. And when we have an opportunity to communicate what we're doing in the privacy space, it's very exciting for us. So thanks for having me.
Well, Larry Magid isn't my real name for privacy purposes. Just kidding, just kidding. If I were going to make up a name, I'd probably come up with something cooler than that. I'm the CEO of StaySafeOnline.org, which is a nonprofit internet safety, privacy, and security organization that's been working with NCSA on Stay Safe Online projects for many years now. And we're also the host of Safer Internet Day, which takes place Tuesday, February 6th, about a week, a little more than a week, and that's going to be live streamed at saferinternetday.us. And as my bio says, I also am the on-air technology analyst for CBS Radio News and KCBS Radio here in the Bay Area. My big interest, especially around this conference, this panel, I think, is how privacy is really changing dramatically with the Internet of Things and the fact that devices in our homes no longer have what we typically call user interface. I actually am not 100% sure how to update the security settings on my doorbell or on my door lock. I have a vague idea, but I know you don't do it by touching the device, that's for sure, because there's no screen or keyboard or even keypad. And then the fact that we are surrounded by sensors. I have probably 5 or 6 Alexa devices. I shouldn't say that word, by the way. Anybody watching the stream, I just turned on your device. Echoes and a couple of Google Home products in my house. So virtually every room in my house is being surveilled, hopefully only when I say that magic word. But that's based purely on trust. There is absolutely nothing I can do other than just trust that Amazon and Echo are doing what they say they're doing, or not doing what they say they're not doing. So I think that these are all very important issues, especially as the technology gets more generic and we get more players in the field. I mean, right now we do have these big public companies like Amazon, Google, and Apple that are the leaders, but there's nothing at this point to stop companies that you and I have never heard of. And in fact, many of these devices have chips and other technologies from companies you and I have never heard of. And even if we do trust Google and Amazon, we have no idea about all of the players in the chain. So all of that combines to give us a very scary kind of scenario. I am optimistic, as other speakers have been, that there are ways that we can take control of this through technology and policy, and mostly, and this is why I run Connect Safely, consumer education.
Excellent. Do either of you want to comment on how this change of technology has changed the notion of privacy in your world?
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating because as we get more technologies that are connected, we also get more benefits. And I think depending on which age you grew up in, the cost of that, giving up that data and the benefits has a different price point. And so I really enjoy the diversity of ages in this group because I feel like diversity is privacy is such a personal experience, right? And how much am I willing to give up for the word we shall not say, and my door locks and my heating, and is that a feature that I want to have? And I think really we talk about privacy as this blanket statement, you should have more of it or less of it, but it really is a very individual experience that and education is one of the parts that I find really interesting, because if I can give you the parameters of what you should be considering, you are then empowered as a user to make better choices about which products to buy, vote with your dollars, encourage your suppliers to represent your needs in the products.
It's funny, I was telling my colleague right before this panel that the other night, if you live here, there was a small earthquake, and I have an earthquake kit, right? Because that's what you do in California. It's a pretty typical thing. But oddly, most consumers don't have an online safety toolkit that they have at the ready. And why should that be any different? It's just it's the same scenario, just in a different form. And so that's why I think education is going to be super important as we become more and more connected, because you need to be aware of what's happening online, what you're doing, and how the ecosystem is a part of it to help you or potentially harm you, and how you can mitigate that. But, it's a toolkit.
Yeah, and if I can just make an analogy between online privacy / security safety and transportation safety, I can think of 3 buckets. There is the area where you have some control. When you're driving your car, although you don't have complete control, you can always get blindsided by another driver. You can be sober, you can be safe, you can make sure you bought a car with the best possible safety equipment. Then the next one is when you get on an airplane. You can put on your seatbelt, but pretty much you better choose a good airline and you better hope that they chose a good pilot. But the final one, when I think about the Experian breach, is like you're just walking down the street and a plane crashes into you, or something falls off the building. You have absolutely no control. I mean, I didn't even choose to do business with Experian. They may be a great company, but I never signed up to be one of their customers. Equifax, excuse me. Oh, I apologize. My apologies. Boy, I'm about to get sued. Equifax, thank you. You're probably from Experian, right? Equifax.
You've turned on all the Alexas online and on this.
Equifax. No, but seriously, we are the subjects of companies that we have absolutely no control over. And so I think that we really need to think about this on the various levels. Obviously, there is a lot we can do to protect our own privacy. I thought that those 5 points that were given earlier were excellent. Some of the tips came out in the first points. And there are also things that we can demand of companies like the ones in this room to make sure they're doing the best they can do. And if we don't feel that they're doing that, we should look for other companies. But at some point, it becomes a policy issue. At some point, we have to rely that someone is out there protecting us against things that we have absolutely no control over. And as much as I hate to talk about government role, especially in this day and age, somebody ought to be looking out for us to make sure that we're not victims of these planes falling out of the sky.
No, you're absolutely right. And I personally believe that a lot of what the corporate world is going to do is going to have to be on a baseline of regulation that's hopefully will show up someday. But this is a good chance to give our AT&T rep a chance to, because AT&T is such a, it's part of the DNA of the internet. It'd be interesting to hear from your perspective, what are you doing? You know, what does your privacy program look like?
Yeah, thank you. So, we have a kind of myriad of tools that we are utilizing to protect your privacy and to also give you the knowledge to help you protect it on your own. So, we do obviously have a public privacy policy that you can check out, but we don't just list it online or just put it in your bill. We have a video on the internet that explains it. They are confusing. We're not going to lie about that. There's a lot of regulation already in place that we need to use certain language, and we want to make it easy to digest and for consumers to understand how their data is being collected, how it's being utilized, and what protections are already in place. There are a lot, just a lot of times you don't know that they are. So we'd like to make that easier for people to understand. In addition, we have actually a data advisory group with our big data team in which we bring in external experts in the field and places like de-identification to work with our internal subject matter experts to tell us, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? How can we make it better? And we take that very seriously, and that's why we bring in people outside of the company. But what I'm most excited to share with you is we launched a program in the fall called Cyber Aware. And what Cyber Aware is it's another 5-step overview of things that you can be doing as consumers to protect yourself online and be aware of, kind of larger cyber issues like fraud. And the reason why we did that is we took a survey of about 1,000 American consumers this past fall, and we wanted to know how they felt about their online privacy. And about 43% or so felt like they weren't really sure how to handle their online privacy. And a lot of the confusion is, who is responsible for it? What can I do? Am I doing the right things? I mean, just recently, I think a lot of you are aware, there's new guidelines on how to make the strongest password. And if you're like me, you start to have a tendency to use the same ones over and over. Well, we all know that is a bad decision. So how do you choose ones that work for you? So our 5 points, and they do overlap with some of what Michelle just shared with us, is to think, know, strengthen, aware, and check. And to think, this can happen to me. We have a tendency as humans to think, oh, that happened to somebody else. I already know somebody. It can't happen in my orbit anymore, right? So, but you have to think about your online privacy and fraud as something that might occur to you. And I think we've seen that in these larger data breaches. And when you think about what don't open, this seems like I feel like sometimes a silly thing to say, but we have to remind ourselves, don't open emails, even on your phone, or text messages from people that you don't actually know who they are. I mean, these scams keep coming because they are working with some people. And when you are, reading through all of your email, I know that can be very challenging. And, be aware of what is happening online. So as part of our website, we do list out things that are happening from a cybersecurity and consumer privacy area that maybe have nothing to do with our services or even, our particular customers, but we want you to know that those exist because, it's a holistic task to keep your privacy safe online. And then one thing I would just note too on there, we do, make sure you're aware of looking for HTTPS and having the locked on the bottom corner of your screen. These are things I think younger generations in particular take for granted, and we need to make people aware and teach people from a young age to look out for these things.
Masha, I'd love to hear a little more about how you feel you can incentivize businesses to do the right thing. We've talked a little about the need for some regulation. It's good to hear about these kinds of corporate programs. How do you approach trying to get companies to step up to the plate?
So there are 2 points that I think are salient here. First of all, is that privacy these days is a selling point for organizations. Being a more secure product doesn't hurt a company. So using that as a differentiator is a great benefit to a company. So from a business perspective, realizing that you can be ahead of the market by choosing to do, in our perspective, the right thing and giving privacy choices to your consumers is a valuable way of starting to design your product from the get-go. And then when you consider that perspective, knowing that your users, your consumers are in charge of their own data, you don't have the privilege of defaulting to collecting all their data as yours. And choosing to be transparent around why you're collecting that data and what you're going to do with that data and why, and what you're going to do with that data and how it affects the user, and more importantly, what benefits do they get out of it. But being transparent with that whole conversation and saying, which of these steps do you want to opt in and opt out of? And not just one big button to say, I do want all of my data or don't want all of my data. It's like, maybe I want some of my data. Like, I'm okay with you using this because I get what benefits I have out of that. And honestly, I don't need you to tell me what wine I like because of my DNA sequencing. That's not worth a trade-off. But I would like to know whether or not I'm susceptible to Alzheimer's. Like, that's an okay trade-off. And so, from my perspective as a user, I want more granularity at knobs, and from a business perspective, that becomes a benefit. But how do we actually apply that? So money obviously speaks volumes, but motivation is a huge component of it. I think many developers don't understand the impact of choosing to design for with privacy in mind. And privacy is a nebulous thing. Like, whose privacy am I actually protecting here? What does it even matter? And so storytelling here, in my experience, has been incredibly valuable, both in security issues as well as privacy. If you can connect a story about where someone's privacy settings actually save the day, or the other way around, give a developer or a product manager or a business owner a reason to know why they're fighting for this cause internally, because if the only thing that they have is, well, if we add privacy and opt out of data, we lose money. But if you can't connect to the story of, yeah, but we're protecting this person's rights or their safety, and let me give you a story of someone whose life was saved because we set a default to something that benefited them, it really helps connect it to a much more human experience.
I think that's great. I liked also earlier today, we heard about the comment of trying to get those notifications midstream, not in the terms of service. I know one tool that many universities are embracing is a product. It's not a product, it's community developed called YouApprove. Right when you authenticate to use a service outside of your university, it pops up and says, here's the data we're sharing with this third party. And you have a chance in most cases to say, that's not okay, I'm not going to use this service. So it's not elegant, but it's effective. But I want to go back to a comment you made at the beginning, Larry, about all of these devices that are in your house. You know, we've been talking about what consumers can do when you're confronted with choosing a service. But if you're putting these sensors around your house, we in security aren't even quite sure how to talk about them. Yeah, right. They don't have interfaces. They may not have an IP address. And so I'd be curious what kind of advice you'd have for people as they approach that.
And to extend that, even devices that do have interfaces. I have an Android phone. I install an app, and basically I'm giving that app permission not only to do all the things it says it can do, but to enter into the memory of my device at any time it wants to. You know, with Windows and Mac, you have to be a little bit techie to know how to do it, but there is a way you can control startup devices, startup apps. On smartphones, they just go off and do their own thing. And I once used this Android app killer and found out I had 34 apps running, none of which I had launched.
There was a research project at one of my past positions. They had gone through the entire Android market. It was a few years ago, smaller. And they looked at what permissions each apps were giving it. The number one permission grabbing app was it was a phone Bible. And had access to all of your log information on your phone.
A Bible.
A Bible.
God was accessing it. That's why. Yeah. It's how God. It's a new way God can find out what's going on. No, I mean, so seriously. So even those with user interfaces are not giving. So I think it's about control. And the reality is that we have essentially given up control. Are there solutions? There are, but I think that they have to be driven by industry or potentially by government. Certainly, I would like to start with industry by, for example, making sure that any device that you install in your house has an app or a web page or some kind of UI ability to take control over it. So if I really want to understand my doorbell, now maybe 99% of people won't do this, but at least give us the choice. Even as a techie, I can't do it. If I want to be able to change the security parameters of my doorbell or on my lock or on the thing that turns my lamp on, there should be a way to do it. Now, for example, to its credit, both Google and Amazon do give you apps that you have some control over the devices. You can turn off the microphones, turn them on. A lot of these devices don't even have that. So I think industry needs to go farther away. Consumers obviously need to be educated as to what they have in their home and what risks they're taking. Now, I love my IoT. I can't imagine going back to a place where I can't pick up my smartphone and make sure the garage door is locked. On the other hand, I know I'm taking a calculated risk, just like I took a calculated risk when I got in my car today to drive here. I just think we need to minimize that risk and give ourselves as much possible control as we can. So consumer education is one part, but as somebody who has dedicated his entire career to consumer education, I have to say that we need a little help. We consumer educators need a little help from industry and government to make sure that things beyond the control of consumers are also protected.
Excellent. I was wondering, since we've only got a couple minutes left, does anyone want to give some advice or action items that consumers or people in the crowd can take? Margaret?
Feel free to go to AT&T.com/cyberaware. It's a
I was not paid to do that.
So my favorite privacy tip is I would go into your social media settings, particularly Facebook, and see what apps you have granted access to. There are tools that will let you retroactively go in and ungrant them. You'd be surprised probably how many apps are still using your Facebook authentication to get access to your current contact lists and personal information. So as the previous speaker said, set a date and go through and delete some stuff in the back that you've granted in the past that you may no longer need. But that's particularly one that I try to keep on top of personally.
And mine is go after the low-hanging fruit. I mean, it's true that I'm carrying a wallet and a good pickpocket probably could steal it, but I don't have it, I do whatever I can to make it harder. So everything from passwords to not saying stupid stuff on social media that you shouldn't be sharing, to knowing the difference between a private message and a post. Believe it or not, I still see people posting things on Facebook where they meant to send private messages, obviously having really strong passwords, using two-factor or multi-factor authentication. Those simple, easy things, they don't take you all the way, but they go a really, really long way towards protecting you.
I think the last 15 seconds I'll say also, remember you're an army of one. Simply talking to people, and my favorite one is on Facebook, is my sister, who insists on posting pictures of my other sister's 14-year-old daughter because she goes, look at the cute thing we did. Not a great idea. But thank you. We're out of time. Thank you.